Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bible Talk, the place where we connect the Bible and everyday life. Today, my guest is Amanda Florczykowski, an author and speaker and the founder of Able Moms and Vigilant Families. And we dive into a topic that most people don't talk about, don't like to talk about, rarely even think about, and that is sex trafficking. And she tells the long version, or what she calls the medium version, of the story of back in 2016 when her almost 2-year-old daughter was taken out of her arms at a grocery store. And thankfully, they were able to thwart that. But it's a story that you need to hear. And she's got practical help for what do we do as families of young kids, of teenagers, and as they grow, how do we strengthen the family and how do we combat this horrible, horrible issue? So dive into my conversation with Amanda Florczykowski and then take some action. Well, Amanda Florczykowski, thank you so much for being here on Bible Talk.
I'm so glad to be here, Keith. Thank you. It's good to see you again.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we first connected through Hope Speakers, kind of different thing that I do about speaker. And as I heard your story and how you go about your speaking career, I'm like, okay, I need to have her on Bible Talk. So this is too important of a topic, hard topic, a topic that either people don't want to talk about or they're not equipped to talk about. And so it's just when I first heard your story, even the little bit that I heard during that interview, I was like, oh my goodness, we've got to hear a little bit longer version and really help some people out, because this whole issue of sex trafficking, people either think it doesn't exist in their area or it's not something it's just too big. They can't make any difference, Mm-hmm. And so thank you first of all for agreeing to be on here and talk about a topic that many Christians are not talking about at all. So,
amen. Yes, thank you.
So before we dive in, tell us a little bit about you. Who is Amanda, and where are you calling in from? And give us a high level overview, and then we'll dive on in.
Sure. I came to know the Lord in a 4th grade classroom. I had a Bible believing faith my entire life. And then 2016, the story that we're going to share, and then several other traumas that involved my children that threatened to take each one of their lives, was really what I call my unraveling. It was a season where I talk about what true surrender means and rubber meets the road faith. Like, how do you answer the question, is God good? Is he good to me? When you really are a Bible believing Christian with a worn highlighted Bible who's in church and sharing the gospel message, but something happens so outside of your purview that you don't know how to reconcile that with a good God. And so I would say that's where my faith really, really grew intimately with Jesus as my best friend. That, I think, as always, our faith is more than a lifestyle. It's who we are. And that really kind of set up what I do now. I'm CEO of Able Moms International under the umbrella of Amanda Flow Ministries, which also does some anti-trafficking work. I have 5 children. I live in Colorado. For the last year, I've been homeschooling. So shout out to all the homeschool moms because they deserve medals. We will be
done for the summer?
We are done. Well, hopefully today, Keith. We'll be done for the summer. We keep saying it's the last day, but it keeps dragging on. But I've been married close to 18 years. I met my husband when he was in full-time vocational ministry. I was a Christian school teacher, and life is just exciting and adventurous.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm an author, speaker. That's kind of what I do on the regular, I guess.
Right. And that's how we first connected.
Yeah.
So with the Hope Speakers, and knew that you were interviewing you there about speaking and writing and how to connect those two, all that kind of stuff. So conversation for another day. So, but I'd love for you to tell in whatever way, length, depth you want to, the story of the grocery store. And I would also like to know, kind of, because that launched a whole lot of things into where you are now with Able Moms and in that whole sex trafficking arena. And wondering, before this story, was that something that you had already thought about? Was that something that was on your radar at all? I mean, you knew it existed, but kind of.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'll say that there was enough, even throughout the duration of our friendship, there have been bits and pieces that we've talked about, but not the full story. So I'm going to give the medium length today.
Okay.
But for Bible Talk listeners specifically, who go to amandaflo.com, today we'll give them I think the preface and the first 3 chapters it is online. The box will pop up and they can simply put in their email address and they can get the full story, right?
Okay.
But I will share what I'll call the medium version today.
Okay.
In 2016, and I do address your question about three-fourths of the way through.
Okay.
But I just dropped my 2 older boys off to school, who at the time were 6 and 7. And had, like any typical grocery shopping day, I knew that the nap countdown was on. I had a pretty good clip through the grocery store. I had my infant son at the time still in a car seat carrier in the front of the cart, and then my daughter in the actual cart. I just had to get a few things, and I was headed to the register when I realized that I had forgotten something, and I had passed the register, past the exit doors, and was heading to turn into an aisle when a gentleman stopped the end of my cart by butting his cart up to mine. And he very intentionally started a conversation where he directly addressed my 2 kiddos by saying, "Oh my goodness, they sure are cute," and tried to strike up a conversation about my 2 kiddos. And I just thought the whole interaction felt a little funny, but I didn't think much of it. I just rerouted myself around his cart, and it all happened so fast that I looked over my shoulder and I said, "Well, thanks." And as I turned into the aisle, probably about 10 yards away, and looked over my shoulder, I saw that he was still standing there looking at our family like he really wanted to have an intentional conversation that I had cut short. And so I grabbed my items, made my way back to the register. Again, didn't think much of it. And there was a couple that was tarrying by the end of the register that I noticed only had a few things. If I remember, it was like water bottles. I know that they had rope, and they had a few other items, but I only remember the rope and the water bottles, and I think it was rice they had. And so I ushered them to go ahead of us, and immediately the woman turned around and struck up a conversation with me, and she was addressing my daughter. And I thought it was kind of funny. Anybody who's watching Bible Talk that has kiddos, typically the younger the child is, that's who gets the attention first. So if there's a cooing baby squirming in the cart, that's who the mom is going to say, "Oh, how old's your baby?" And then they'll talk about the toddlers or the older kids as well, but it's usually always the baby first. Well, she didn't say anything about the baby. She immediately addressed my daughter. And it struck me as fairly odd, but I had just taken her out of the cart. I had set her on the ground so she can get out her wiggles, and I'm loading the belt. And so I'm thinking that she's really simply grateful that I let her go ahead. And so my mind is there. I'm not really paying attention until the 3rd time she asks me the same question. "How old is your daughter?" So I look up and I respond. And then I realize that she turns over her right shoulder. She's speaking to the man that she's with, who's facing the opposite direction. He's not one time looked at my kiddos, other than when he initially saw us get behind him. She responds to him in a different language. He then responds back to her, and she turns back to me, and she asks a 4th time, "How old is your daughter?" And I realize in that moment that she's interpreting that I'm actually having an unwanted conversation with this man about my nearly 3-year-old daughter and not this woman. So at this point, she is so physically close that she put her hand on our grocery cart. Now, this is the same grocery cart that my little baby is sitting in. And my daughter is now wedged in between her and the grocery cart on the other side, where she's actually closer in proximity than I am. So I reach down and I scoop up my daughter and I put my hand, or put her on my hip. I take my other hand and I put it on my son who's in the cart. And I don't do another thing. I just start praying and asking the Lord, what is it about this situation that I'm not aware of, that I need to be aware of? Well, at the same time, I'm ignoring all of the Holy Spirit bells and whistles that are going off, because I know, like you do, that is our inerrant caution. And Giger Renzer, a German psychologist, actually came out with the concept of heuristic thinking. He's not a believer, but he talked about how caution is actually a very human inerrant ability, and it's healthy. And then there are other authors and speakers who went on to make it popular, are training FBI agents and you know uh, um, oh, I can't think of the word, people in movies, what is the word? Actors and actresses.
Yeah.
With this concept of heuristic thinking, how much more is a simple scientific understanding to a believer who's indwelt with the Holy Spirit? And so I'm taking inventory of my surroundings, but now being very mindful of them. I'm still thinking, oh, she's probably not a believer. I need to share the gospel with her. She knows that I'm a Christian because of how I've responded. I want to share I want to share my Christian faith. Like, I need to just be nice, right?
Yeah.
And that was the exact opposite. Like, you and I both know and I would assume your audience, when we read scripture, that's religion, right? That's not really listening to the Holy Spirit. That's just saying this is right and this is wrong. And that's what I was doing. I was painting the situation black and white instead of going, Lord, what would you have me to do? And just having a little moment of prayer there. So I looked at her, and at this point, like I said, she was so physically close, and she asked me, well, may I hold your daughter? And this is a woman that is making me feel wildly uncomfortable. She's physically close to me. She's interpreting, and I don't know what's going on. And so, but again, I want to be kind to my detriment. So I said, no, I think her diaper is, and as the word wet left my mouth, she was forcibly pulling my daughter from my arms. And this is the only point, Keith, that she actually put distance between she and I. And she started walking away, grabbed her little wrist, manipulated a wave, and she asked her to parrot as she looked at her, okay, say bye-bye to mommy. What a peculiar phrase to ask a child to parrot. I mean, it was just peculiar. So I am in this moment. It's the most surreal moment and the closest to what I've heard people talk about is fight or flight. It was terrifying. The thought that's going through my mind is, who do I save? Do I go after my daughter at the risk of my son's safety? Do I stay here with my son at the risk of losing my daughter forever? I mean, I don't mean to sound dramatic, but it really is the most surreal situation that you can be in. Is your children's safety is paramount, and that's been threatened, and you can't trust your surrounding. So I fortunately, praise God, was able to recover my daughter in that situation, because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would not be able to fight for other people's children like I do now. If something had happened to her that day, because I would spend the rest of my life fighting for my daughter and to find her and for her safety, right? And I know parents that unfortunately are still in that fight. But God's grace, by God's grace, I was taken up to the threshold and introduced to something I was never aware of before that time. So that also by his grace and his sovereignty, I now am able to step onto this battlefield. I slumped over the register, and I mean, my knees just came out from under me. I'm holding my daughter, I'm holding my son, and the woman behind the register said, "Are you okay?" And to answer your question, I don't know to this day what made me say it, other than the prompting of God himself, because I did not know anything about trafficking. I mean, I knew that it happened, but overseas. I wasn't really familiar with what it was. I didn't know all the definitions or how prevalent it was. I didn't know that it was, it surpassed arms trading and was second to the drug trade. I didn't know that it happened in classy neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods. I just didn't know. I didn't know that there were 750,000 pedophiles on the internet every second. I didn't know how prevalent someone could find a child online. I just didn't know. I didn't know any of this. And so I do believe it was God's hand that fell out of my mouth and rolled right onto the atmosphere. And as I said that, I picked up the sharp movement of someone over her shoulder. And in the book, I call him the tattoo man because that was the most definitive characteristic he had. I have a picture of him, and there's more to the story that we won't go into. But if you saw him, I'd call him that. He has tattoos here and down his neck and down his arms. He was dressed rather inappropriate for February winter. He had on a t-shirt and shorts. His head was shaved down to the skin, and he just looked like a bad dude. And when his eyes met mine after the word sex trafficking came out of my mouth, I think my daughter was just the potential victim of a sex trafficking abduction. As I'm speaking this out to a perfect stranger, when she asked me if I'm okay, he looked at me, Keith, like, if you say another word, I'll make sure you never speak again. I mean, it was that vitriol and hatred. It was like I was staring into the eyes of the devil himself.
Wow.
And yeah, it was wild. It was so wild. So there's a lot more to that story, but I'm going to fast forward to two significant points, unless you have any more questions in there.
No.
Two significant points. So
Okay.
I really struggled, like some of your viewers. God calls us to things and we wrestle with the calling for a little bit. And I really felt like I got home. I was sitting with the Lord. I started researching what had just fallen out of my mouth, not because I had any reason to prove it, but because I thought, Lord, why did I say that when she asked me if I was okay? What is trafficking in America? And what do I not know as a mother? And what I uncovered was absolutely appalling. And I thought, if I didn't know as a college educated woman and a seasoned mother, who else didn't know? So I shared briefly a post of my story and then the statistics, and I cited them so that any reader could go back and research for themselves. I tied it up with a Bible verse and sent it into cyberspace, and it's estimated today, I think it's like nearly 60 million people have read that story. It was put in everything from like the Muslim Mothers News, and it was emailed and showed up on news stations and on popular websites and Christianity Today and Charisma magazine. I mean, it showed up everywhere. And I immediately felt concerned for our family's reputation, my children's safety. And I'm just being transparent with you. It's not the right answer, right? Like, that's not the fearless charge ahead, God's called you to an answer. It was just where I was at. I was really struggling with feeling like this was not by accident and very purposeful, but God, what do I do with it? While also reeling from the episode itself. And so I had a really hard interaction and a hard day. And I found myself that evening in my prayer closet, which really was my closet. The movie War Room had just come out. You remember that?
Yeah.
And I was in there. I had popped on my worship music, and I was just like, Lord, you've got to show up in all this. I just feel like I've been through a blender. I'm scared. I feel uncomfortable. I don't like that our small community is looking at me as a whistleblower. Like, this is hurting relationships. And, I'm a relational person. I hate rejection. Like, where are you in this? And I'm willing to look foolish because I know you've done it for me. I'm willing to say the hard things. But Lord, everybody out there, 60 million people, know that I tied that up with a Bible verse. And I'm not willing to make you look stupid. So I need to know that I know that I know that I'm not speaking out of turn, but that God, this is a situation that you allowed to happen, and now you are working in. I need to know. I need to know that what I'm saying is true and that it's not just some overreaction. And Keith, I'm not kidding you. I wouldn't have even had my phone in there had the worship music not been playing. And I heard a ding and my phone illuminated. And it was a picture of the tattoo man. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt when I saw his eyes and his specific tattoos who I was looking at. And the woman on the other end, she said, I know you don't know me. And I'll just say the phrase. She said, I've been through hell and back. And I read your story and I wondered if this was the man. And through our friendship, I proceeded to find out that she was, in fact, one of his trafficking victims. And that everything that she was saying about his prison release and his prison record, when I went back and actually researched, was in fact true. And to double down on that, when it had such virality, the Texas Rangers got involved, which if you have any listeners from Texas or the South, like they would know that that's a really big deal. We're talking like the upper echelon, like the Texas Rangers are a really big deal. So they get involved with this investigation. And towards the end of the video that I had pulled from the grocery store, we had sent to our local police and they sent it on to the Texas Rangers. And he's viewing the videos from the security camera while we're talking. And he says, you know, Mrs. Florczykowski, I don't know that this is necessarily trafficking. And in that moment, you know, it spoke to every condemnation that only a viral post can bring. When you have that much virality, you have the curious, you have the cheerleaders, and then you also have the condemners. I mean, it's just the nature of the game. We see that in social all the time. And I was really struggling with justice. I knew this was happening. I knew what the Lord had brought me to and what he had spoken, and that this was a reality, that trafficking is an abhorrent reality here in the United States, not just overseas, and that I was supposed to proselytize that. And I just said this quick prayer, Lord, you're going to have to enter into this situation because I've been here before and you know that this is a reality, but you have to give me the words and you've got to do something big here. I can't do it by myself. And he said, well, Mrs. Florczykowski, it appears as though that tattoo man walked out of the store with nothing in his hands. And he walked out with another gentleman. And it hit me like a lightning bolt. And I said, wait. I said, did the other gentleman have on a long sleeve white shirt? Yes. With writing down the side? Yes. I said, did he have shaggy hair? Yep. He had like a bandana or a hat on. Uh-huh. He had glasses. Yep. His hair was brown. He looked like he was in his late 30s. Uh-huh. And after the yes, continued. I said, I'll call him Charlie. I said, Charlie, that is the man that butted up to me with his cart and immediately engaged me about my children. That's what he looked like. And so you'll have to, I'll send, you'll have to read the rest of the book. There's so much to it, but that's the medium version.
Oh my goodness.
It's not good. You want to hear the latest? It's exciting.
Yeah.
I have been praying. I never get off of a stage where I don't ask the audience to pray for that man, that he's back in prison, who I believe to be the ringleader. The tattoo man is the ringleader of that. He is back in prison. And I've been praying for him for years, along with several audiences. And I just talked to him for the first time on the phone, maybe 8 weeks ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And got to tell him that we've been praying for him and that I believe God is fighting for him. And I believe it's going to be a really neat story of redemption.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I want to know so badly every detail of that conversation, but I'm guessing that we can't talk about that and just throw it up on YouTube. So
sure, yeah. Well, book number 2 is coming out soon. So
okay, wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So that has led you to start a couple different nonprofits. So tell us about those, and then I want to shift into kind of messages for parents and for teenagers and for kids and kind of stuff like that. So, but tell us about your nonprofits.
Yeah, so we have, well, Amanda Flow Ministries encompasses two. We have Vigilant Families, which is a, excuse me, we have Vigilant Families, which is a collaborative educational platform where we bring in all manner of experts, victims, anybody that a parent wished that they could have coffee with, right? And record them in these short bite-sized videos. That is the first educational platform to break it down into age-appropriate content. So we have three, just like a stoplight. The red is for adults, grandparents, only parents, teachers. The yellow is for youth. And then the green would be for small children that we would say under junior high, right? And we speak to the trafficking epidemic and what they need to know. And the platform is evergreen so that the content is always being revised to keep up with the epidemic's changes. And I will address that in the third piece when you said, okay, talk to parents. So I'll table that. The other one is Able Moms International. And I think it's a really valid question for anybody to ask me. Why would someone who's passionate about the anti-trafficking movement and counter-trafficking work to be involved with a motherhood ministry, right? Like, where's the connection there? Gosh, I'm sorry, Keith.
No problem. No problem.
And the answer to why the connection is because as I wrote my first book, I came across an interview where an incarcerated trafficker suggested that it took less than 8 minutes to identify whether your child or mine was a good candidate for his trafficking employment. And the key identifier that he was looking for was lack of strong family relationships, because he identified that if there was a breakdown in the family or relationships who cared about this child, that there would be an opportunity for not just himself, but any predator to remove that child from any familiar relationships and use them in their business in the most horrific of ways.
Oh, yeah.
As I was writing and I'll back up. So I thought to myself, well, which familial relationship do I know best? It's not fatherhood, it's motherhood. And so that really was the initial spur to think about, okay, I believe that moms should be capable in their everyday practical parenting, unshakable in their faith, and memorable in their mentorship, all within the context of local mom communities all over the nation and world. That was doubled down as I wrote my second book. I was able to interview a pedophile counselor. He, unfortunately, in the state of Colorado, he's one of three just here in our city, our large city, Colorado Springs. He has a 5-year waiting list, and he has been counseling pedophiles for over 30 years, for 3 decades. Our conversation, I anticipated, would have been like an hour and a half, and I was grateful for that. And it lasted close to 4 hours. And one of the things towards the end of our interview, I said, okay, I'm going to ask you the $1 million question. Can you tell me, in years and years and years of interviewing pedophiles, predators, traffickers, which, by the way, he said traffickers were the most cold. He said there's a difference between just a pedophile and a trafficker or predator. He said traffickers are the most cold people that he's ever interacted with. There's like a shell almost, or like a wall that you don't even feel like you're talking to a person. It's that cold. Yeah. And I thought to myself,
I would imagine you'd have to be. I mean,
exactly, right? But I just thought it was interesting that he differentiated the two. Not to say one's better or worse. It was just a passing comment. But he said, in response to my question, what is the common thread? And after 3 decades of interviewing these people, what do you see as maybe this common factor, the commonality? And I had in my mind already some ideas, maybe it was an incarcerated father, they themselves had been abused. And Keith, without missing a beat, he said, matter of factly, well, it's that they have poor or bad or unloving moms. the breakdown with their relationship with their mother is the common thread with all of the people I counsel. And I nearly dropped my pen. And so I got done that interview. The next day, I called my friend Melissa out in California, who does about the same thing out there. And I said, this is what he said. Do you feel like this is true? I mean, I know you don't have this scientific study, but just experientially, is this legitimate? And she said, absolutely, unequivocally. That's what she identified. And I thought, well, we're onto something. We're really onto something at Able Moms International. If we are strengthening the family unit and we're doing it through motherhood, we are indirectly changing the course of children's history, not just the ones that are growing up now, but or the ones that, you know, can be impacted now by older people, but by sharing with them, but also we're stopping it from happening in future generations. And so that really was what catapulted me and why I'm passionate about motherhood, in addition to some of the other trafficking, counter trafficking activities we do.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
It's a lot.
Yeah, we could. This could definitely be a 3-hour Bible Talk episode. So for a mom or dad of, let's say, a young kid. I mean, like this happened when your daughter, you said, was almost 2, and you had an infant in the card as well. So because. And if the message is the same, the message is the same. But if you were going to talk to somebody who has kids under 8, and then maybe kids who are 8 to middle teenagers, and then kids who are like in high school, or what would you say to the parents, and what would you say to the kids as far as what they need to know, what they can do, where they can get educated? I mean, kind of what if you had 5 minutes, because you have that time right now.
Okay. So, yes. We're going to try to do it in less than 5 minutes. I would tell them.
You need to take whatever time you need. This is too important to cut off.
I love you. In all sincerity, I would tell them to go to vigilantfamilies.org. That's a great place to start, because I was that parent. That was me. That's why I created it, is because I saw there was a need that I needed fulfilled in my own life. And so we developed that. You have known me long enough to know now probably that I love a good testimony, but I really thrive best when there is a lot of data collection, research, information to back up then how to interact with that. Right. So I don't want to just leave people with a testimony. I want to say, hey, here's all this tangible data that I have discovered since then that you need to walk away with. You've got to put in your back pocket. You have to put in your parental arsenal. And that really was where Predator-Proof Kids, saving your children from unspeakable heartache, it is coming from. So that will release hopefully sometime this year, if not the first part of next year. But that really was the point, because I go through 12 chapters and I talk about these are the things from experience and now from research and from other people's experiences and everything that I've collected that you need to know about as a parent. And I would start with a couple things. I would say my purview is different than most people. I did not go to college for this. I didn't decide, I didn't have a passion for that. And that's what propelled me. It was all God. It was completely by his doing. And that I know I can trust in and can take to the bank. It was nothing of myself, but it really was this sovereign interaction that happened in February of 2016 that changed the entire game for myself and my family. Mm-hmm. And I know that because of that verse that we were talking about before, that as I was struggling, and I went to my Bible and I was reading through, and you know, Keith, what I'm talking about, when something on that page just comes alive to you, like you shared your testimony with me. But Proverbs 24:11, it says, rescue those who are unjustly sentenced to die. Save them as they stagger to their death. Don't excuse yourself by saying, look, we didn't know. For God understands all hearts and he sees you. And God now knew that I knew. So I could say, hey, Lord, now that I know, I'm just going to still turn and walk the other way. And I couldn't. I knew because God had sovereignly it had collided with my life. And now the question was, what am I going to do? So I didn't come into it from anything other than what God had propelled me into. And that allowed me to look at this atrocity from a little different perspective. I firmly believe, as an entrepreneur, my husband and I are business persons, that I see trafficking as a business. And because of that, I think it's like Coke or Pepsi or Nike or any other business. You have to evolve and change to be successful in the marketplace. So I would say that to a trafficker, we parents are competitors. We are fighting a trafficker for our children's time, attention, and their lives. We come to the table to protect them, and a trafficker comes to the table to rob them. And so we have to be one step ahead. But in order to do that in the business of trafficking, we have to be more savvy. And I always say we have to outthink a trafficker. And so there are very practical things that I go into in our materials, in our books, everything from don't put a bumper sticker of your child's school on the back of your car. Be very careful with if everybody's your friend on Facebook, be careful of putting your child's school uniform or their football uniform on your social media. We always post pictures on our socials after we've come back from the vacation, never while we're gone. There are so many practical things, putting your child's name on their t-shirt, talking to your kids about strangers, what's appropriate, using the terms that are the genuine, anatomically correct terms, all sorts of things. Last night we had this conversation again in our home. When our kids are little enough, we say we've taught this to them since they were very little. After this happened, we never, ever, ever, ever keep secrets in our home. We keep surprises, and there's a difference, but we never keep a secret. If someone says this is a secret, the first thing that should trigger in your heart is to tell your mom and dad, because that word should have negative connotation. And then now that we have teenagers, you're right. That's a really wise question. There's a difference in how you train your younger kiddos and your older kiddos, which is why Vigilant Families has a youth section. And then we talk to parents even more uniquely. We share, okay, this is how you should be talking to your kiddos. But there are some things that I think are really practical. We could talk all day. There's a lot of training that we have about online, even online gaming is something to be very careful. There was a really fascinating study done that I can't get into where a woman went undercover. She was in a kid's chat room, I think. And I think it was less than a minute that someone solicited her. And they actually show in this research, what is the word I'm looking for? This research exercise, some of the things that were said to her, thinking that she was like between an 11 and 13-year-old little girl. And it would turn you pink. I mean, it's just so vile what our kids are having to deal with. Now that video games are live, anyone can interact with you. And post-COVID, a lot of schooling is online. Online is such a significant place where a lot of this can happen. My experience obviously was abduction, and that is a reality. There's a whole nother side to it, because I do look at trafficking as business. I would say that runaways and abduction, there's a lot of research there that I have a unique look on and will be addressing in the book. But at the end of the day, if it comes down to relationship, and we as believers know there then relationship with Jesus, the two greatest things we can be doing, no matter what our kids' ages are, and I do not mean to sound trite, but is to invest in our children relationally, invest in their personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and to make a way for that to have room in our home, and to engage our kids, to give them the capacity and the practice while they're under our roof to hear from the Holy Spirit, to hear from God, to have their own personal prayer life, to listen to those bells and whistles and those red lights and those cautions, and to understand God's voice. If we can cultivate that in our home through relationship, by praying for our kids, eating around the dinner table, asking questions, everything Deuteronomy 6 tells us to do, we set our kids up to be predator proof. We set our kids up not to succumb to the savviness of these predators. And we give them the best possible chance to outsmart these people that are trying to rob them.
Wow. Wow. This is as I knew it would
So much
be.
there.
This has been just so important, so rich, so helpful and challenging. And I'm just things that I don't even think about. I mean, granted, my kids are now older. I say I've got 3 kids and I only have 1 kid left because my 2 kids are older, over 18. But
Yeah.
it's one of those things where things like putting the bumper sticker. Never thought about the bumper sticker. I
Mhm.
uh, I have thought, having coached soccer for so long, I have thought about the names on shirts type of a thing. So many young teams I see that are kindergarten age kids or below that are putting their first name right on the back of their jersey, and I'm like, oh, don't do that, please don't do that. And
Yeah.
so thank you so much. Oh my goodness,
Thank you.
this has been rich for sure.
Thank you.
So
It's always a
what?
pleasure.
Say that again.
I said it's always a pleasure. I
Oh
love
yeah,
talking to you, Keith. I thank you.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So let's. I like people to, I always in Bible talk, we have conversations about all different kinds of things.
Mhm.
I love to hear a little bit about the person behind by just asking some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
First one, it's Bible talk. So, I have to give the Sunday school question, which
Sure.
is,
Yes.
it could be, you've already shared from Proverbs 24:11, but is there another, either whether it's a verse or whether it's I don't limit it to what's your favorite Bible verse. What is there a person in Scripture or a story or a book of the Bible? Tell me about
Yes.
something that you would say is my favorite something in the
Yes.
Bible.
Okay. Well, it depends on which day and what I'm reading to ask me
Okay.
whether the Old Testament or the New Testament is my favorite, because depending on what I'm reading, I'm like, oh, today I love the Old Testament. Today's the New Testament. I would say one of my favorite books that I read through every year is the book of Exodus. Um, I think the concept of freedom is an anthem that is a life anthem to me. And I
Hmm.
would say never underestimate um, your your message. Never underestimate the narrative God's told you to tell, and
Hmm.
never underestimate how small or insignificant your sharing of that is. Because one of my very favorite verses is Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who can be against us? And I was an 18-year-old girl driving behind a semi truck when I saw that verse on the back of the semi truck, and I looked it up, and it radically changed my life and the
Hmm.
trajectory and the course of my life. I can't wait to meet that trucker in heaven, even though I don't know who it is. So
Right.
never underestimate.
Right. That's great. That's great. Okay, so before we hit record, you had already told me that your husband and I have the same passions for coffee and ice cream.
Yes,
So if you were going to throw 2 things out there that would be 2 of your favorite things to put in your mouth.
it would not be coffee and ice cream.
Okay.
Yes, two favorite things. Oh my word, tacos, tacos for sure.
Okay.
I don't do coffee. I do hot tea. I have lately gotten into the habit of loving a good Coca-Cola, and I'm brownies and chocolate cake all the way.
Nice. Nice. Okay. So, uh, what is a vacation spot you've never been to that you
Uh-huh.
can't wait to get to someday?
Oh, Aaron and I have always talked about getting a home actually out on the water in Fiji, renting one of
Oh,
those homes on the water. We've talked
you
about
can
that for
jump off the
years.
deck into the water, those things.
Oh, we would love to. Yeah, that's
Wouldn't
been
that
on
be
our
epic?
bucket list for a while. Hopefully someday, but we'll see. Yes.
Very,
I
very
I'm
cool.
pretty I mean, we're pretty laid back. We love to travel. We love a good story, love movie nights, love entertaining and having, like, our kitchen table is our biggest deal in our home. We love people around our table. I love sunsets. I love finding money in my pocket. I'm just pretty simple. I'm just pretty simple.
Right.
That's
Oh
that's
yeah.
it. I
Oh
hate
yeah,
the
my wife and I were
carpooling.
we were just saying the other day that it doesn't matter how big or fancy or whatever the house is, everybody gathers in the kitchen. You're just like,
Yes.
so make
Oh,
your kitchen hang outable.
yes. And you will fight trafficking if you do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Get your
Yes,
kids around your table. That's the way to do
for
it. You nailed it.
for sure. All
Thank
right.
you, friend.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much. People, I've already put some of these up there. People can go to amandaflow.com, can go to ablemoms.com. I know that you, Vigilant Families, ablemoms.org, not
Yes,
.com.
sir. Yes.
ablemoms.org and vigilantfamilies.org,
Yes.
and connect with you directly at Amanda
Yes.
Florczykowski with a little underscore.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
And
all right. Well,
amandaflow.com, you can find all that other stuff too. That's fine.
right,
So,
right.
man,
Yeah,
thank you.
go here, and then there you go. And
Sounds
all
good.
these links. If you're watching, you're watching this on YouTube most likely. So just scroll down, and I'll have all those things that you can just click. Let's make it super easy. So, all right, Amanda. Well, thank you so much, man. This is as I said, this has been rich, and I'm grateful for you and your ministry and your heart for your own family and how that spills over to help thousands of others. So thank you so
Thank you,
much.
sir. I
All
appreciate
right,
it.
everybody. We will see you on the next episode of Bible Talk.